Revolution State Colorado Call. We have Representative Joe Neguse, who is a rock star. We have Alex Newell Taylor, and she is with the National Nurses United. Jim Potter, Colorado Foundation for Universal Healthcare. We're going to hear about what's going on in our legislature in Colorado. And Andrea Denault is going to talk about another type of voting called approval voting. So please join in the chat. Please, in the chat, put your name, tell us where you're from, any exciting thing you want to pass along. That's where we all meet each other and get to know each other. And our revolution, it is so exciting when I look back at all the things that our revolution has done since Bernie started this group, the progressive candidates that our revolution gets behind and is helped to get elected, particularly on a lot of these real important issues, Medicare for all. With this pandemic, we all know how important this is. And Joe Neguse is one of the co-sponsors. We have got to get Medicare for all. And so that's one of the reasons we're featuring this tonight. Also, we know that you're bound to have some questions. So please, we ask that you put those in the Q&A. If you want to make comments, that's fun. Put those in the chat. But definitely, if you want questions answered, those should go in the Q&A. And our revolution, it started, was it 4 years ago? I lose track sometime. But it is an organization that is very grassroots, very bottom up. And so, we hope that you will become a member of our revolution. There's no obligation, but we have our state revolution. We have local chapters. We have a chapter in Weld County. We have one in Denver. We have one in Colorado Springs, one in Boulder. And so I see some familiar names in there. It's really just fun to see everybody. And I just am so excited to be here. And this is our second day of spring, right? We had spring yesterday in Colorado, and now I looked outside and saw a little bit of snow. And so I think that you are going to be so excited with the guests that we have, and particularly the information they're going to give us. I know that I found myself being a little confused on what is going on in our state legislature in Colorado, and then what's going on nationally. So I think some of that's going to really get cleared up. And also what we're going to find out is what are the actions that we can actually take? Because I think many of us here are activists. We want to do things that make a difference and to know that our time is well spent. So that I think can be some questions answered tonight. And so I am going to turn this over to Gary Kahn. Gary Kahn will be the moderator for tonight, and Gary is one of our leaders with Our Revolution Metro Denver. So take it away, Gary.
Okay, thank you, Anita, and thanks everyone for coming. I'm the guy in the middle here, and this, as you can probably guess, is a pre-pandemic event, and I thought it'd be nice to have a reminder of what things used to be like, but thank you for joining us on Zoom tonight. As Anita was saying, we have a really good lineup of speakers, including Representative Joe Neguse. The first part of our program will focus on issues around Medicare for all, but we will also continue our discussion of alternative approaches to voting that are more representative. So we will have our last speaker tell us about approval voting. That's Andrea. And let me move on and introduce Alex Taylor. Alex is an organizer for National Nurses United, the largest organization of registered nurses in the United States. NNU has made passage of Medicare for All a priority, and Alex is doing a great job organizing grassroots support in Colorado and in several other states. Alex, welcome tonight.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Gary, for that great introduction. Yes, my name is Alex Newell Taylor, and I'm an organizer with National Nurses United on the National Medicare for All campaign. And I'm so excited to be with you all tonight, especially because this was a really big week for Medicare for All. This past Wednesday, Representatives Pramila Jayapal and Debbie Dingell officially reintroduced the Medicare for All legislation into the U.S. House of Representatives. At the time of the bill introduction, there were 112 original co-sponsors, and that co-sponsor number is already up to 114. And we do have a bill number, learn it, love it, HR 1976, and that is the Medicare for All Act of 2021. So now that the bill is officially introduced, it's time for us to get to work on increasing that number of co-sponsors however we can. And if you want to read the full text of the bill, or perhaps more likely an overview of the bill, we're going to put the links to those in the chat for you. But I'm here to talk to you tonight about why we need Medicare for All right now, and some of the details about what Medicare for All is and what it would fix. So like Gary said, National Nurses United has a robust campaign to win Medicare for All, but we are first and foremost the largest union of registered nurses in the US. And nurses are motivated to fight for healthcare justice because they have experienced firsthand how damaging a system is that puts profits over patient health. So let's talk a little bit about what we are facing in a profit-driven healthcare delivery system. Prior to the pandemic, health insurance companies were already reporting billions in profits every year by rejecting medical claims, denying care, and raising premiums, copays, and deductibles. In a profit-driven healthcare system, the number one goal isn't actually to deliver healthcare. The number one goal is to maximize profits. The business model of health insurance companies is this: take in money in the form of copays, deductibles, and premiums, and then deny claims in as many ways as possible to maximize profits. And this model of a healthcare delivery system has produced a combined $40 billion in profit for the 7 largest health insurers in the US in just 2019 alone. And this is only worse under the pandemic. We learned recently that United Healthcare, one of the country's largest health insurance companies, had its most profitable quarter in history last year. That is insane. So it really is this simple. Insurance companies profit when people receive less care, so we have to cut them out of the equation. Clearly, our corporate-run healthcare system is deeply flawed, and much of it boils down to the profit motive. So I just want to take a step back now and revisit some of the key failings of our current healthcare system. So for decades, the US healthcare system has cost the American public more than any other industrialized country in the world. Yet we have worse healthcare outcomes than many of those same countries. Per person, we spend more on our healthcare than any other country. We spend about $11,000 per year per person in the United States. In other industrialized countries, the cost of healthcare per person is half that. At the same time, we have more unhealthy people per capita than any other country. Infant mortality in the US is nearly double that of other major industrialized countries. And 68% of adults in the US over the age of 65 are living with 2 or more chronic conditions, compared to just 33% in the UK. And on top of that, millions of us still cannot even access the healthcare that we are paying for. Even with the ACA in place, 29 million people, and that was before COVID, still don't have health insurance. It's many more than that now. And at least 44 million are underinsured. And some estimates are that could be as much as 85 million. And underinsurance is generally defined as when somebody has health insurance, but they can't afford to use the insurance that they have because the copays or deductibles are too high. And again, all of these numbers were from before COVID. At least an additional 27 million people lost their employer-sponsored health coverage during the pandemic. And that is because here in the US, many people receive healthcare through their jobs, which means when you lose your job, not only do you lose your income, but you and your family lose your health insurance. And this is happening during a pandemic. And 5 million people who lost their insurance during the pandemic still have no form of insurance. And that is the single largest drop in the number of people with no health insurance in our country's history. And of course, in addition to this, we know that about 45,000 people in the US per year die simply because of a lack of healthcare. And on top of that, medical debt is the number one cause of bankruptcy in the US. We've all seen those GoFundMe sites, people having to beg for help paying their bills, their medical bills, and over 1/3 of the money raised on GoFundMe last year was for healthcare costs. So these are just some of the many consequences of living in a for-profit, employment-based healthcare delivery system. So let's talk about what we think needs to change with our healthcare system. Let's focus on one of the core problems of our current system, which huge majorities of the country agree on. We must have a healthcare system where every single person, regardless of their income level, race, ethnicity, gender identity, pre-existing conditions, geography, or immigration status, can get the healthcare that they need. In other words, we need universal healthcare. And if you're on this call tonight, you probably agree that that's what we need. So let's talk about what Medicare for All, HR 1976, what it is and how it works. So first off, Medicare for All means truly universal coverage. Everybody in, nobody out. No more uninsured, no more underinsured. Medicare for All would be a single public program, not a patchwork of public and private programs. Instead of having tons of different private, employer, and government insurers, one publicly funded plan pays for all necessary care. And it's important to note that Medicare for All does not mean that delivery of care, meaning doctors and nurses, all become public too. Delivery of care doesn't change. Who pays for that care does. And replacing a complicated and expensive private insurance-based system with a single payer system would streamline one of the biggest costs in healthcare, the inefficient and bloated administrative bureaucracy of the insurance industry, which is estimated at a mind-boggling $800 billion per year, or 35% of our total healthcare expenditures is administrative costs. Medicare for All would also provide truly comprehensive care. It would not be simply Medicare as it is right now, expanded to everyone. Medicare for All vastly improves and expands the Medicare system and program, not only by covering everyone, but also by greatly expanding its benefits. It's truly comprehensive, covering not only medical care, but also adding dental, vision, hearing, reproductive care, mental health, and long-term care. Medicare for All would also give freedom of choice. To get these services, you can see virtually any doctor and go to virtually any hospital in the country with no networks limiting your choice. In addition, it is those doctors and nurses who would determine what care you need, not the insurance company bureaucrats. Under Medicare for all medical care is free at the point of service. Under our current system, you likely pay a monthly premium to an insurance company. You have to meet a yearly deductible before that company will pay for your care. And still, you have to probably make a co-payment at the point of service. Under Medicare for All, there are no premiums, no co-pays, and no deductibles. If you need care, you go to the doctor, you show them your card, and you get treatment. That simple. And finally, Medicare for All includes a just transition for insurance and administrative workers whose jobs are affected by switching to a more efficient healthcare system. In both the House and Senate versions of the Medicare for All bills in Congress, they both include significant funding for wage replacement, retirement benefits, job training, and education benefits. So now that I've hopefully convinced you that Medicare for All is what we need and that we need it now, let's talk about what you can do to help. So luckily, here in Colorado, almost all of your Democratic representatives have already signed on to the bill, except for Jason Crow. So if you live in Jason Crow's district, let's turn up the heat on him. Let's get him on the bill. Also, the Senate version of the bill will be reintroduced soon. It's Bernie's bill, of course, and Bernie's been a little busy with helping get the stimulus package passed, but it will be reintroduced very soon, and that is another opportunity to get to work on pressuring your senators to support the bill. And while we're waiting on that, at NNU, we're planning some really exciting things over the next few months. Now that the bill's been introduced, we have a top 40 target of representatives that we are going to be going after. We're going to be releasing that very soon. I can't quite release it yet, but we are going to be going after these representatives that we think are most likely to sign on to the bill. And you are able to help us with that work, even if you don't live in their districts, by joining our call or text teams. We're going to be doing targeted texting and phone banking into these districts to voters to turn up the pressure on these representatives. So in just a moment, I will put that link in the chat for you to join our volunteer from home team. That's pretty much it. So thank you for having me. I can't wait to work with you all. Now is the time for Medicare for All, and I believe that we will win.
So we have a couple of minutes here, and
we have a couple of minutes for questions.
There's
Great.
One question.
Yeah.
Okay. So Barbara Tidd asks, no premiums. We who have Medicare now pay a monthly premium plus a monthly premium for supplement. So she's
right.
No premiums at all was her question.
Yeah, great point. So like I said, when we say Medicare for All, we don't mean simply Medicare like you have right now, expanded to everyone. We mean a new and improved version of Medicare that everyone would get. And under this new and improved version of Medicare, there would be no copays, no deductibles, no premiums.
Okay, I think we can take one more question. Nita, I think we lost your audio.
Yeah, I said that's the only question we had.
Oh, that's the only one? Okay, well then thanks Alex very much. And we look forward to working with you and NNU as you come up with other grassroots actions for us. And we're very proud that we've been able to get most of the congressional delegation to be co-sponsors. And I'm especially pleased tonight that we have Representative Joe Neguse with us, one of the original co-sponsors. Representative Neguse is representative for North Central Colorado, an area that includes Fort Collins, Boulder, Denver's northwest suburbs, and much of Jefferson County, which is where I live. So I'm especially happy to have Joe here tonight. And I want to also mention that he is co-chairman of the MFA caucus in the House. And so I think he deserves special credit for moving this bill along. Thank you. We look forward to your comments tonight.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's great to see all of you. I'm sorry that I can't stay for the duration of the entire event. You might hear my 2.5-year-old daughter, Natalie, here in the background on this Sunday evening. She might come by and say hi here on the screen. But it's wonderful to see all of you. I hope that you're all doing well and staying healthy and safe, of course, as we finally near the end of the tunnel here with respect to this pandemic and see some light at the end of the tunnel over the coming weeks and months ahead. I couldn't be more excited to be able to participate in this important event and to say thank you for all of your activism and for your efforts regarding Medicare for All, an idea whose time has clearly come. As was mentioned, I represent Colorado's 2nd District in the United States Congress, representing Boulder, Fort Collins, Broomfield, our Central Mountain communities, Western Jefferson County, and more. And I have the privilege of serving as one of the vice chairs of the Medicare for All caucus, which is chaired by many of you, as you know, by Representative Pramila Jayapal, who's a friend and also a fellow officer within the Congressional Progressive Caucus. And it is an exciting time in Washington because, as you all know, we just recently reintroduced the Medicare for All bill in the House, as was mentioned, and the very thorough explanation of the various provisions of that bill. And it's important to know that we've added a few co-sponsors since the last time around when we introduced it in the last Congress. Support within the House of Representatives and within the broader Congress continues to grow day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year. And it's because the empirical evidence tells us that the Congress has to step up and do the right thing and ultimately ensure that we have universal health care in the United States of America for all the various reasons that were mentioned just a few moments ago. We know that the COVID-19 pandemic has hit our country incredibly hard, and in particular, communities of color and those who are the lower income communities as well. It has exacerbated what were structural disparities when it comes to our healthcare system. Now, I have always come at this from a simple proposition. I believe that no family in our country should go bankrupt if, God forbid, a loved one gets sick. And yet, that is precisely what happens to so many families across our country each and every day in the United States of America, despite the fact that we are the richest country in the world. And yet so many of our various healthcare outcomes, as was described, infant mortality rates, other various leading and lagging indicators with respect to our healthcare system, lag so many other Western countries. And of course, those various other countries all have one thing in common. They have some form of universal healthcare. So I believe, as I said, that this is an idea that is broadly supported both by the American public, because the American public every day is living the struggles of trying to find adequate healthcare and try to be able to afford healthcare and being put into the terrible position of having to choose between paying one's healthcare bills or paying one's mortgage or rent, choosing between being able to go to your doctor or getting groceries. Those are false choices that should not be forced on any American, which is why Medicare for All is a bill that I am so proud to support in the United States Congress. And I'm so excited about the momentum that the legislation has built over the course of the last several years. I know that many of you will be aware of this, or well aware of this, but in the last Congress, Medicare for All, for the first time in the history since its introduction in the early 2000s, was heard not just by one committee, but by several committees, including the Rules Committee, as well as the Ways and Means Committee. Now, of course, we've got a long way to go from legislative hearings to actually getting markups and ultimately getting the bill to the floor. But I am grateful for the many folks across the country, and certainly many in Colorado, who have raised their voice and have been beating this drum year after year in creating the ecosystem that is enabled for this legislation to be as successful as it is today, with over 100 some odd co-sponsors on the House legislation. So I look forward to any questions that you all might have, but most importantly, I simply wanted to say thank you for what you're doing to help ensure that we have universal health care in the United States of America.
Thanks, Joe. Anita, do we have some questions?
I don't see any in the Q&A right now, but if anybody wants to raise their hand and we can call on them. I have a question, if I might, since nobody else has. Thank you, Congressman Neguse. We are so proud of you, and thank you for coming on. The question that always gets asked is, how are we going to pay for this? Yes, you're right. That question always comes up. Of course, those, and I would say some ask that question in good faith, right? And my response, when someone asks, how can we afford to enact a Medicare for All system? My response is, how can we afford not to? I mean, we spend more today on healthcare than any other
Western country. The mass inefficiencies, the administrative inefficiencies that are created by the current system, the amount of money that is wasted is simply too much to bear. And I think many economists have produced empirical studies that show that, in fact, over time, you would see this type of system be more cost effective than the current system that we have in place today. If you go to Representative Jayapal's website, as well as our website, neguse.house.gov, you can get a link out to the Medicare for All Caucus webpage, which includes some more detailed information about the pay-fors within the legislation, which better explains some of the mechanics. But again, at the end of the day, I would just simply say that right now, Americans, as I said previously, are paying so much in the current private healthcare system, in many cases, for outcomes that far lag other countries. And I don't think that that's a system that we ought to be willing to accept here in our country. I think we can do better.
Anita, I think we had some other questions.
Yeah, do you have time for one question?
Yeah, we have a few more minutes.
Okay, because I think you're on daddy duty. So
I am. So if I have to run, you may see me run.
Okay, well, we want to be very respectful of your time. So here is one. Representative Neguse, this is from Radhika Nath, who actually is one of our 3 DNC members. We know the fight is going to be hard. We have a huge grassroots movement here in Colorado, including the Foundation Universal Healthcare. They can be called on to help, so please reach out to them. That was her comment. And then another question we had in there, what are you seeing as the biggest objections? We already talked about, people say, how are you going to pay for it? What else are you seeing so that we know those talking points?
Yeah, I'd say 2 things. One, it's great to hear from Radhika. I hope she's doing well. I know she's doing a great job representing us on the DNC and the National Committee. And she's certainly right with respect to one of the most important parts of the work, in my view, is sharing stories, right? Every American has a story. Every American has a family member, a friend, or perhaps himself who has dealt with an insurance company as they've worked to try to secure care for themselves or for a loved one, and been forced to expend ludicrous amounts of money in that endeavor. And I would encourage folks to share those stories, because it's incredibly informative, I think, for policymakers to hear those stories. And it's been incredibly informative and meaningful for me. One of the biggest obstacles, of course, is that there are various entrenched interests against any kind of change to the existing system. And those interests tend to have a lot of money and obviously very powerful corporations and lobbyists and so forth. But again, my sense, serving in the United States Congress, and perhaps it's because I'm a little younger and a bit naive, but I honestly think at the end of the day that folks are responsive to the needs of their constituents. And if we simply do enough to share those stories that are so powerful and so compelling, that I think we can ultimately win out and ensure that this kind of progress is achieved. And of course, we've been there before. I mean, the Affordable Care Act in 2010, obviously didn't go as far as so many of us would have liked, but nonetheless, did a tremendous amount in terms of expanding access to coverage and care for millions of Americans. But it did not happen without a real battle within Congress, right? And those various interests that I mentioned that are already, right now rallying to disprove, the arguments that we've all talked about tonight as to why Medicare for All makes the most sense and is the most prudent course forward. So I thank you. You probably hear Natalie, I have to run, but thank you all so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I look forward to visiting with you again, and really appreciate your support.
Thanks so much for coming tonight. Be well. Okay, so we'll move on to our next speaker, who will bring us a more local perspective on what's happening in Colorado. Jim Potter is currently the legislative coordinator for the Colorado Foundation for Universal Healthcare. And this follows a long career as a civil rights attorney, where he was involved in many progressive causes. And he also had an opportunity to serve as president of the Chicago chapter of the National Lawyers Guild, which has been around for a long time, really helping marginal communities achieve justice. And so we're very happy to have Jim here tonight. Thank you, Jim.
Okay, well, thank you very much. It's great to be here. Welcome, everyone. I would start off by saying we all know the mantra, if at first you don't succeed, try again. And we at the Colorado Foundation for Universal Healthcare repeat that mantra a lot because, as you may know, we promoted and supported and got into the ballot Amendment 69, the first universal health care program for Colorado, and we lost on that ballot initiative. But we are back and we're trying again. And I think there are three reasons why this time around the opportunity for success is a lot better. So for one thing, back in 2016, we didn't have an independent study of comparing Colorado Care to other public health proposals and other systems. And that deficiency kind of hurt us, I think, in the campaign. The other thing is that at that point in time, the public was pretty reluctant to have any kind of dramatic change in healthcare. And the third reason is that the general legislative landscape that was presented to us was not all that favorable for a single payer plan on a state-by-state basis. So let's turn to the independent study part of it. In 2019, we decided we would do an independent study. So we drafted a bill, and that bill would require that the legislature institute a task force to study a single payer plan for Colorado and compare it to the other options on the table in terms of cost, benefit, and coverage. So after some time, Representatives Emily Sirota and Sonia Jaquez Lewis, as well as Senator Mike Foote, agreed to sponsor our bill. That went through a lot of different drafts along the way. Some changes were made. The bill was made very compact. It came out to be called House Bill 1176, the Healthcare Cost Savings Act. That act requires the start of a task force that would hire an analyst to compare three different systems of healthcare for Colorado. The first would be the current system, that hodgepodge system that we all live with to this day. Another system that would go into the analysis would be a multi-payer system. And that would have mandated benefits, but it would still be both public and private, kind of like the German system, which has a lot of independent insurance companies, but they're highly regulated. And then the third system that would be analyzed and compared to those other two is a single payer, universal, publicly financed, privately delivered healthcare system. So the task force got appointed. They in turn hired an independent analyst, the Colorado School of Public Health, and their preliminary report is coming out this May. There's also going to be a final report from the task force that will come out in September. So now we have, or will have, the independent study that we lacked back in 2016. And we believe that that study will clearly show that single payer is the way forward in terms of cost, benefit, and coverage. And it will also probably mirror some 22 national studies that have been done on single payer, all of which have come to that conclusion, as well as several state studies that have come to the same conclusion. Single payer is the way forward. So on the momentum of that, we are drafting a bill to institute a single payer plan. Now let me turn to the second change that has occurred since 2016, and that's the willingness of the public to make dramatic changes in healthcare financing. So the pandemic, as the prior speaker, I think Alex, talked about how the pandemic has really shown all the weaknesses of the present system. It has shown how cruel, how patchwork it is, how fragmented, how inhuman it is. So that the pandemic has really exposed all of these weaknesses in the system. 30 million or more people are uninsured, 45 million or more are underinsured. And you may recall Michael Bennett's campaign when he was running for president. He said he was against improved Medicare for all because he said 160 million people just love their employer-provided private health insurance. Well, I don't think the statement was true at the time, and it's certainly not true now. Now everyone knows how tenuous that system is and how wrong it is to have healthcare tied to employment. There has been a tremendous change in consciousness amongst the American people as a result of this experience. Even many Republicans are in favor of improved Medicare for all. The third change that I talked about is the legislative landscape. So here's the shift here. The recent push for improved Medicare for all by Jayapal and Sanders is not only a cause, but also a consequence of a changing public perception about healthcare in this country. So that bill and that push to pass improved Medicare for all is actually changing the political consciousness of the American people. So we're seeing that even other bills like public options or amending the ACA or other minor fixes to the present system, they all feed into this kind of national debate that's going on, and that causes the public to be concerned and to make this a central issue of our day. So it is also calling forth a movement then to really overhaul our existing system of healthcare. And that has in turn created space for single payer plans state by state. Just as in Canada, their national Medicare plan came about as a result of province by province adoption of single payer plans, first in Saskatchewan and then spreading throughout Canada. So we believe in a two-track way of approaching Medicare for all. One is we fully support a national plan, but if that doesn't work, we also want to have a second track so we can start a state-by-state movement that will move across the country. And we'd like to start that movement right here in Colorado. So that's the change in the legislative landscape. The other change in the legislative landscape is that Representative Ro Khanna introduced in 2019 a state-based universal health care act, which increases the amount of federal funding that states would get for implementing a state plan. It would increase the flexibility of states to do that. It would increase the funding for states to do that. So this is a very helpful legislative landscape that has taken place. The result of these three changes is that it has created a tremendous amount of momentum for a Colorado single payer plan. And we have been drafting that plan for about the last year or so, and we are starting to pass it around to different social organizations, different healthcare organizations, different social justice organizations to get them on board so that we can propose it in the next legislative session. So that's kind of where we stand on this. What we're looking for and what we would like from other organizations, such as our revolution, is your support, your help in reviewing our draft bill, making suggestions for changes in it, and spreading the word about it. We are working also in coalition with other organizations to push this bill. So, for example, we have Colorado Physicians for National Healthcare Plan. They're part of our coalition. The Colorado American Friends Service Committee, our Ardents for Progressive Action, and other social justice groups as well. In addition, within the Colorado Foundation, we have several different groups that will organize around this proposed legislation. We have a medical professionals group, we have a legislative liaison and advocacy group, we have a business group, we have a grassroots group. So if anyone wants to join any of these groups, that would be wonderful. We always need more people, and we need a lot more controversy around this, and we need to generate it through a lot of publishing of the results of the study that we expect will help promote this legislation. So please join us. If you email me, I'll put my email in the chat, and I will connect you with one of these groups within our organization.
Thank you, Jim.
And also tell you about others.
Yeah, thank you. We're running just a little bit behind, so we're going to see if there's some questions in just a few minutes. We have a little bit of a question period, but we did have a few participants tonight who wanted to speak to some of their personal experiences with today's healthcare system. And they will, we've got 3, and they'll each introduce themselves. So Cleo?
Hello, I am Cleo. I live in Denver. I'm on the council of Our Revolution Metro Denver. And I'm right now on regular traditional Medicare. I not only pay a fee for Medicare out of my Social Security check, I do not belong to any of the managed care Medicare groups because I don't feel they provide adequate service and they cost the government a lot more money than traditional Medicare. But on top of what I pay through my Social Security, I also pay for supplemental and I also pay for drugs. And the thing that really disturbs me now about Medicare is what they don't provide. And what they don't provide is the vision, the dental, and the hearing, the auditory, and the long-term care. Because I also pay for long-term care. And as a senior on a fixed income, these particular things just add to my expenses, so I really feel that, and I've been working for Medicare for a long time. I belong to the organization that Jim was talking about. I represent Our Revolution Metro Denver and DSA in that coalition. So I want to say that Medicare is great. I'm happy it was signed when it was, and I was happy I was able to get it. But if I think about it and I add up everything, I would say that it cost me close to $400 extra a month. And on top of that, Medicare makes you pay your deductible right now over $200 before Medicare will even pay. So that's my feeling right now about Medicare. I'm happy I have it, but I think it should definitely be improved.
Thank you, Cleo. Terry?
Yes, my name is Terry Tucker, and I'm also on the council of OR Metro Denver. And I have a similar story to Cleo's about Medicare, except that there's a little glitch in our system. Social Security age to retire is going up and up and up. But you get Medicare automatically at 65, but you have to choose it. If you do choose it and there's no Social Security benefit to take the money that it costs out of, then you have to pay it out of pocket. And what happened to me was that my age to retire was later than 65. So I didn't choose it. I thought, well, I've got this doctor that I use. I will, kind of take my chances with my doctor because I couldn't pay for both because it came out of my pocket. And I thought, okay, well, I'll just get it next year. Next year comes and I find out that I'm being penalized. There is an actual penalty in the law if you don't choose Medicare at 65, even if they're not giving you the money to pay for it. These are the kind of ridiculosities that exist within the current system. And it all boils down to making people feel you get on the profit bandwagon and jump into these insurance companies and do it on their schedule, or they penalize you and you're less than. This has to stop.
Right. Thanks, Terry. Michael.
Okay, my name is Michael Gibson. I'm in the Our Revolution team leader, I guess, out here in Grand Junction. I was the Bernie 2016 field organizer for all of Western Colorado back then. Since then, I have worked as a customer service representative for one of the larger nonprofit health insurance companies back east through a contractor. It has been an incredible learning experience. I have to keep Kleenex on my desk for all the stories I hear every day, which are heartbreaking too often. I've learned most of the thousands of ways people can fall through the cracks. It's like every day is a new surprise. Oh my God, I didn't know somebody could fall through the crack that way. And then it happens. As a result, I am so for universal health care, but to do it better than any country has ever done it on the planet. We've got all the skills and the money and the talent in this country to be able to pull that off. We need to have also a population that's educated around the healthcare system. It's 18% of our GDP. Why aren't we teaching how to navigate that and deal with that in our school systems? There's one little thing that I found in a research study about some universities, why some universities graduate almost all of their kids and other universities have huge dropout rates, and yet they look the same, big football teams, alumni associations, etc. The only single difference, it was mind-blowing, was simply a policy where every student was talked with once a semester. That's all it was, a call or an office visit to ask how you're doing and then offer some help and resources. We should be doing that with our medical system too. I mean, dedicated, hey, here's your, twice a year call, come in for a preventive visit or whatever, and let's look at that. Other things that we need to have happen is transparency. Most people have no idea what procedure codes are, diagnosis codes. They need to be explained on every single report. We need more doctors, we need more nurses, counselors, et cetera, and we need free medical school, nursing schools, laboratory stuff, et cetera. The biggest excuse I hear from doctors all the time, when people ask about why they charge so much is, well, medical school cost me so much. That's why I deserve $500,000 a year. Litigation costs, OBGYNs have to pay between $50,000 and $250,000 a year for, litigation insurance. That's just insane. Pharmaceuticals and monopolistic, durable medical equipment providers, they need to be regulated, similar to essentially what we have with public utilities commissions, where the public utilities have a cap on how much profit that they can make. Some of what the Sacklers and others did is just unconscionable. And I've got a lot more, but it's 2 minutes is all I got.
You have to move on, but thank you.
So, and Jim, I'd also like to say I would be more than happy to look at the bill and give you some advice. I've been on a committee with that company to help improve things. I have some insights that very few people have, and be happy to help. Thanks.
So,
Okay.
Thank you. We need to move on. We're going to move into a segment of the program where we talk about alternative voting. And I'd like to introduce Andrea Denault, who's National Campaigns and Advisory Coordinator for the Center for Election Science. Andrea successfully organized Fargo's approval voting campaign, making it the first city in the country to adopt the method. And she is currently working to increase awareness about approval voting in Denver, as well as assisting citizen-led initiatives in Seattle, Philly, DC, Portland, Detroit, Austin, and San Francisco Bay Area. So there's a lot of appeal to alternative voting, and tonight we'll learn more about a specific form of it, which is approval voting. Thank you, Andrea.
Hey, thanks for having me. I wanted to, first of all, start by saying I'm honestly just very honored to be on this panel tonight. It's very apropos timing for my life. I'm calling in from my teenhood bedroom, as you can see with the purple paint of the stars in my room. My mom was hospitalized this week, and I've been in and out with her all week. She's a widow on a fixed income. And I'm worried about how we're going to pay for everything that's yet to come. And so I just want to say thank you, Our Revolution, and everyone for having me, but also the other panelists and all the work that you're doing is personally really important to me. As far as approval voting, that is an alternative voting method that not very many people have heard of before. I was curious, I know we didn't do this in our tech check earlier, but if I could, am I able to share my screen and just show a quick explainer video? If not, I can just wing it.
Good question. Since we have so little time, I think it might be best to just make your key points.
Sure. Okay. So yeah, approval voting literally just means that as soon as that there are more than 2 candidates vying for one seat, instead of just picking one person, you can vote for as many people as you want, and the candidate with the most votes wins. The reason that proponents like it is that it, more than any other voting method out there, really just annihilates the spoiler effect. So the vote splitting that is often, the culprit when we see elections like George W. Bush, Ralph Nader, and Gore, right? Everyone wanted to blame the third party for electing George W. Bush, when in reality, we should have the freedom to be able to vote for all the candidates that we like. And so there are a lot of different alternative methods out there. I heard that you guys did a presentation on ranked choice voting recently. And the number one question I get is, why would you want approval voting rather than ranked choice voting? So a lot of people really like the idea of being able to rank candidates in order of preference. I'm also someone who came into alternative voting methods with RCV as sort of my gateway drug to learning about these methods. But what I learned and what I realized, there's a lot of misconception that people have about that ranking. And the misconception is that by ranking, you're somehow sort of able to sort of like stack the deck in your favor in the way that you want. That's not actually at all how ranked choice voting works. That's much more similar to something called score voting, where you actually can assign like a numerical weighted value to how much you're giving that candidate. And so I actually really like score voting, but one of the critiques of score voting is that that ability to give someone a really good high score can work both ways, right? So you can have give your top candidate a really high score, but people that you don't agree with whatsoever can also be giving their candidates a really high score. And so what approval voting does ultimately is elects the candidate who is able to actually garner the most consensus. So the person who is able to really, talk to people across the political spectrum, listen to everyone's problems, and really come up with the most innovative ideas and solutions and actually attract that true consensus. Those are the ones that win in approval voting. So yeah, in simplest terms, approval voting just means that with every single candidate on the ticket, you get to say thumbs up or thumbs down on each candidate. It's very simple. That's it. It's free to implement. It's literally the only change that election administrators need to make is the written instructions on the ballot that say, instead of voting for one, you vote for all the candidates you approve of. So yeah, it's quite simple. And I know we're a little bit short on time, so I'd rather just take some questions if you guys had any before I get too far into the weeds.
Anita, do we have any questions? Did you say?
There's none in the chat, but one of the questions I hear that might be helpful to answer is people talk about gaming the system with some of these different methods. And so would you explain why the system would be hard to game?
Yeah, and that's actually the reason why I like approval voting. It's honestly one of the most bulletproof in terms of being able to game the system. One of the really bizarre talking points that I've heard lately about approval voting is that it means that everyone gets a trophy, which is just, I don't even know what that means or how to respond to that. But really, with approval voting, everyone gets a fighting chance, right? And so when you've got political outsiders, when you've got candidates who don't have a ton of money to spend, when you've got third parties, all of these people who normally aren't considered viable are suddenly viable because you can, right? Voters have the ability to vote for the person who seems most likely to win if they want, but they can also vote for the person that they really, really love without any fear of spoiling the election. So in terms of gameability, there really is no way to game approval voting. Ranked choice voting, plurality voting, first past the post, they're very susceptible to gaming. One of the cities that just adopted approval voting is St. Louis. And the reason they did that is because in their particular city, they did have an issue with stalking horse candidates, right? Where similar candidates would run and split the vote. So they would split a base amongst themselves. And then, by default, end up electing a less desirable candidate, right? Like someone who even fewer people in the city actually liked. That same issue exists with ranked choice voting because ranked choice voting, quite simply, is a combination of plurality voting, but done in runoffs. But those runoffs are all on one ballot rather than subsequent runoffs. So yeah, there's no way to game approval voting mathematically.
So there was a question from Rick Shannon. From Rick Shannon wanting to know, then does it mean that the number of votes counted would be more than the number of people voting? And another question was, does the person with the majority win?
Okay. Okay, so for the first question, the number of votes hopefully actually will be larger than the number of candidates running, because that means that people are taking advantage of the freedom that they have to vote for as many candidates as they want. So that's a good thing. And it's been, in terms of determining a winner, it's just literal simple addition. Whoever garnered the most votes is the winner. And as far as the majority is concerned, from an election science point of view, that's a very loaded term. Because so the way that some people define majority is like 50% plus one. That's how ranked choice voting, it defines majority. Colloquially, a lot of people understand majority as just the most. Those two things are different, okay? So sometimes, I'll give you a hypothetical. Like you could have someone in a ranked choice voting race who is eliminated immediately because they had the fewest first choice rankings. However, that person who is eliminated immediately could theoretically be extremely popular. So if you were to look at, for instance, the 2020 Democratic primaries, you had, a lot of the sort of like moderate leaning types like Joe Biden, Pete Buttigieg, Amy Klobuchar, that whole camp. And then you also had like Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders. With with ranked choice voting, it would be very easy to eliminate someone like Elizabeth Warren, who sort of seemed to appease kind of both the further left end of the spectrum as well as the moderates. But because she wasn't everyone's absolute favorite, number one, she could have been the first to go, even though she might have had 75, 85% approval, right? And so that's kind of the mathematical issue with RCD and with plurality is just that it doesn't measure majority consensus. If you're focusing on just that number, the 50% plus one, how ranked choice voting reaches that number is by eliminating people until the pool has gotten so small that in that pool, you finally have someone who passes that threshold. But in the process, it's very likely that you have eliminated, or that you could eliminate someone that people would have actually been much happier with. That's the reason why RCD has been repealed as many times as it's been repealed. And the hypothetical I gave is actually kind of a bad hypothetical because I know that last year there was an unfortunate controversy with Working Families Party actually using ranked choice voting for their endorsement of President, and Elizabeth Warren ended up garnering the endorsement. And it's sad that I think that caused a lot of mistrust with the Working Families Party itself, when really I think what happened was that Working Families Party experienced what a lot of places who have repealed ranked choice voting experience, which is we're seeing these results, but they seem very incongruent with who the obvious winner should have been to most of us.
Andrea,
there's no way to go back and prove.
I'm sorry to jump in, but I know we're pushing on time, and thank you. These are great questions. We have a bunch. People are obviously interested. Would you mind putting your contact in the chat so that people can reach out to you? Because I think there were some really good questions, and thank you so much.
Also, Andrea, if you can stay after the end of the meeting, we're going to leave Zoom open for people who have some additional questions, if you can do that. And that applies for all our speakers and panelists tonight. If you can stay a bit longer, that would be great. If not, we understand you have other commitments. So thanks, Andrea.
Yep. I'll stick around. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And thank you, Andrea. Is everybody able to hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Excellent. What a great meeting. We heard from some great speakers tonight. Guys, my name is Anthony Morrow. I'm with Our Revolution Colorado, Our Revolution Coordinator. I want to invite you all to join us next month for our April statewide meeting. It'll be on Sunday, April 18th, just ahead of Earth Week. Of course, the theme will be Green New Deal. Of course, we're going to drop the chat in, or the link in chat for you, so please sign up tonight. Moving on to our next national meeting, be sure to RSVP to Our Revolution's Monday night call tomorrow night. We'll be featuring Judith Whitmer, newly elected chair of the Nevada Democratic Party, and Maryland Congressman Jamie Raskin. Again, we'll drop that link in chat for you. Be sure to RSVP. You don't want to miss this call. Find out how they did it in Nevada. Also, with 2021 not being a major election year, I just want to remind everybody that we still have plenty of work to do to achieve the transformational change that we all want to see. This year, we can make real progress on our progressive agenda. I mean, it's only March, and our members have already won major victories in all 4 parts of our 5-point plan. But we can't slow down. We can't take our eyes off the ball, not lift off the pedal for just a second even. We need to keep organizing. We need to keep the pressure on, both inside and outside, in order to win. Our Revolution members held a nationally live-streamed press conference in Washington, D.C. to call on Congress to pass the PRO Act, a landmark pro-labor bill that would roll back decades of anti-union legislation. The House passed the bill, and now we are pushing Democrats to the Senate to get the job done. We encourage you to call Bennett and Hickenlooper and ask them to pass the PRO Act. We also held a rally and press conference in Washington last Thursday following the introduction of the Medicare for All Act of 2021. Michigan Congresswoman Debbie Dingell, who introduced the bill with Representative Pramila Jayapal, spoke at our rally. We're fighting to save our democracy. GOP lawmakers across the country continue to push baseless claims of election fraud in order to pass voter suppression bills. They've already introduced 253 bills in 43 states to obstruct voting. We even have some here in Colorado. That's why our revolution supports the For the People's Act, a landmark bill that will protect voting rights and make sure our government works for the people. The bill has passed the House and is now in the Senate. And again, we encourage you to contact Bennett and Hickenlooper and ask them to pass the For People's Act. The PRO Act, the Medicare for All Act, and the For the People's Act are landmark progressive bills that have been passed by the House. But if we want to get these and other pieces of legislation enacted, the Senate will need to end the filibuster. Our revolution is part of the Fix the Senate coalition, pressuring Joe Biden and Senate Democrats to end the filibuster. You can sign up to join us at the link in chat. And finally, we can't do this without your help. We'd like to encourage you tonight to become our revolution members by making a minimum $5 monthly contribution. We will drop that link in the chat. I'd like to thank all our speakers and all of you for joining us this evening, for all that you're doing to build our revolution. Before we sign off, let's do our chant. When we organize, we win.
We win.
When we organize,
We
win. And when we organize,
We win.
Okay.
Again, guys, please